World AIDS Museum and Educational Center.
I'm Hugh Beswick, and my story is probably in some ways typical, in some ways not typical, but I came from a family where medical issues were openly discussed. My dad was a doctor. From a really early age, we were very open about dealing with things and dealing with medical issues in particular. They were never particularly secret to us. I knew a lot about HIV and AIDS. I was on the board of a couple of organizations from the mid-'80s on that dealt with sexual minorities, number one, and then number two, AIDS and HIV. And so I was pretty aware of the disease, how it worked, what the symptoms were, what happened to people. In spite of all that, and in spite of the fact that I had many, many symptoms, I was unwilling to make the connection between what was happening to me and the existence of HIV. I should have known a long time before I was diagnosed that there was a problem and that it probably had to do with HIV. I went for a long time. I was vice president of a large company, and I knew that if I discovered that something like that, it could change my life. And so my reaction was to ignore the symptoms. I got to a point where my sister one day at a family holiday found me sleeping before dinner, and she asked me what was wrong, and I couldn't answer the question. And she said, "I think you might have HIV, you better get checked." Within 2 weeks of being diagnosed with HIV, I discovered that I had full-blown AIDS. My CD4 count was 121, which is very low. I had PCP pneumonia, and very quickly after that, literally within a few months, I came down with Nonhodgkins lymphoma. I had a strain called Burkitt's, which, by the way, happens to be closely associated with the presence of HIV. It's also a terribly virulent form of non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. I ended up going through 6 months of heavy-duty chemotherapy, which left me just completely drained. At the end of it, I was free of non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. However, I was 104 pounds, and they discovered, because of all the associated things that they gave me, like prednisone, that my bones were full of holes, and within a few months of the treatment, I had pancreatitis, and then my bones started to break. I had a shattered hip. I literally ended up in a wheelchair. They pieced together my right hip, and I was unable to put any weight on it for about 4 months. My back broke in several places. I had around-the-clock care. My family had actually found a place for me because they thought I was dying and they thought there wasn't much time left. I'm one of the fortunate people. I had superlative medical care. I think the only reason I made it was because I had such well-coordinated medical treatment. I developed diabetes insipidus, and it's a fluid imbalance. Long story short, I ended up in and out of the hospital for months, taken mostly by ambulance because I wasn't able to walk. This went on for a long time. Part of the healing process was to share what happened to me so that I would become more comfortable myself with my own reality, and number two, would be able to help other people who were faced with the same situation. And I did it, and what I discovered was that every time I did it, I became a little healthier, I became a little bit more integrated. The reason I'm involved with this museum is just an extension of the same thing. I realized that there's such a stigma associated with this disease. This isn't just about disclosure, this is about literally denial. Denial can be a life-saving thing if you need to get through the day, but denial can ruin you if you let it run your life. I think it's unbelievably important that people take the time to look at the reality of their lives and ask themselves if they need to do certain things in order to protect their own lives and the lives of other people. It's very important to get the world to a place where there's a willingness, because willingness is kind of the door opener. That's the key. have to start with eliminating the stigma so that people are capable of making the right decisions in the beginning about themselves and getting checked so that they can avoid what I was confronted with and had to deal with. I don't think people should have to go through what I went through.
World AIDS Museum and Educational Center.